Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome. I'm David Darling. I'm an aerospace engineering professor here at GW School of Engineering and Applied Science, also known as SEAS, and I'm going to be the moderator of the program today. I stepped down as Dean of Engineering a couple of weeks ago, and I'm now on sabbatical, but I'm really very happy to return to campus today to moderate this exciting event. Well, it's wonderful to see you all here this morning, and thank you for joining us. In addition to people in the auditorium, we also have alumni, friends, and others watching remotely on our live stream. So to those of you who are watching remotely, a very warm welcome also. We're very glad you're part of this special event. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a special welcome to some of the guests in the audience. Let me first introduce NASA's Senior Advisor for STEM Engagement, Dr. Roosevelt Johnson. Please stand. NASA Public Affairs Officer, Catherine Brown. And the International Space Station Operations Manager, Kevin Matro-Cavage. Thank you. In a few minutes, we'll meet NASA astronaut Dr. Serena Auñón-Chancellor when she greets us from the International Space Station. But she's not the only member of the Auñón family participating today. Her sister is here with us, Christine Zanaletto, and her daughter Anna Sophia. Would you please stand? Back there. Also joining us are students and teachers from 6 local elementary and high schools. When I call out your school's name, please wave your hands vigorously so the audience can see you. We have McKinley Technology High School. We have School Without Walls High School and School Without Walls at Francis Stevens. Smothers Elementary School. Whittier Education Campus, and Langley Middle School. The GW Teach program sponsored transportation to and from campus today for the DC public schools. That really helped. It made it much easier for the schools to participate in this field trip. So thank you to GW Teach for sponsoring the transportation, and a special thanks to Zach Peikoff for the coordination. Thank you, Zach. And last, but certainly not least, I want to mention that the Hanover First Lego League team drove all the way from Hanover, Pennsylvania to join us today. So welcome to you guys, too. Well, this is a proud moment for us here at SEAS because we get to showcase today 2 alumni of ours who are astronauts. First, we'll get to talk to Dr. Serena Auñón-Chancellor, who's currently on board the International Space Station. And then we'll speak with Dr. Charles Kamada, who's a former astronaut and is with us in the front row of the auditorium. Welcome, Charles. At this point, let me give you a brief outline of how the program's going to flow. In just a few minutes, we'll start the downlink with the ISS, and we'll have 20 minutes to ask questions of Dr. Serena Auñón-Chancellor. We have 20 students and adults waiting off stage on my left who've been selected to ask these questions, and you'll see them come up to the podium and join me one at a time. When the downlink starts, NASA will send us an audio and video feed from the ISS, and you'll be able to see Dr. Serena Auñón-Chancellor on the screen behind me. Typically, there's a 3 to 4 second delay between when we speak here in the auditorium and when she will hear us. So don't be too surprised if you notice short lags between when we ask the questions and when she answers them. We'll move as quickly as we can through all 20 questions. NASA can't guarantee that we'll be able to get all the way through before the downlink expires, but I guess we'll just have to do our best. After we finish the downlink, we'll move immediately to the second part of the program, which is our conversation here on stage with Dr. Kamada. I'm going to lead off with a few questions for him, and then we'll open it up for audience participation, and then we'll wrap up. We're just about ready now to do our communications check with NASA Houston. When we get word that NASA's ready for the check, you'll see a live shot of Mission Control Houston on the screen, and I'll come back to the podium. When you see me step back up here, let me ask you to be quiet for a little bit of time so that I can hear clearly the communication with NASA Houston. So is everybody ready? Yes. Yay! I am too.
Houston Station, I am ready for the event.
George Washington University, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station. This is George Washington University. How do you hear me?
GW, this is the International Space Station. I hear you loud and clear, and welcome.
Good morning, Serena. This is David Darling, and we're thrilled to see you and hear your voice coming from more than 200 miles above the Earth. Thank you, and thank NASA for making time to do this downlink with us. We have a packed auditorium here. People who are waiting to hear from you, to ask questions, so we'll get started if you're ready. Are you ready? Let me invite our first student to the podium.
Absolutely, I am ready.
Terrific.
Hi, my name is Jarvis Harrison, and I'm from Smothers Elementary School. My question is, how do it feel when you blast off to get to the International Space Station?
So let me tell you, that day of launch was absolutely amazing day. The ride up here on the Soyuz rocket was extremely smooth. I was surprised at how smooth it was. The part that wasn't so smooth were the stage cutoffs. And that's expected as you burn from one stage to the next. And it was very much an abrupt jolt forward in your seat. You almost felt like you were falling a little bit until the next stage kicked in. And so it was about 8.5 minutes that took us to get into orbit. And the entire time, you feel the engines beneath you. You know that when those engines light on the ground, you are going somewhere, and really, really quickly. So it was a blast, literally.
My name is Marley Lucas, and I'm from School Without Walls High School. My question is, how is one affected by zero gravity?
That is a big question, because certainly our body is affected in a lot of ways. And since I'm a physician, I have studied this for many, many years. And the first thing that happens when you get into microgravity is your body is essentially offloaded from gravity. So your heart doesn't have to work as hard, your bones and your muscles don't have to work as hard, and your muscles begin to atrophy after a very short period of time if you don't use them. And your bones actually start to break down. Now, not in the macroscopic sense, but really on the very tiny microscopic scale. But we begin to see biomarkers in the urine very quickly, within 24 to 48 hours, that tell us our bones are beginning to break down. And so in order to counter that, we have several means. But one of the biggest things we do up here is we exercise 2 to 2.5 hours a day. Each astronaut on board, in their schedule, we have 1 hour of aerobic exercise, and that's on either our treadmill or our special bicycle. And then we also, in a sense, lift weights for about 1.5 hours every day. And you may ask, well, how do you lift weights up there? Weights don't weigh anything up on the space station. Well, we have a special device called ARED, the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. And that device actually generates force utilizing vacuum tubes. And we can get up to almost about 600 pounds of force. So I can do everything from squats to deadlifts to bench press. And we do this every single day. And a lot of the science has shown us that it works really, really well. So we're pretty happy with some of the results that we have so far, especially because we didn't have some of these devices very early on in the space station program. The other thing that happens is, up in your head, usually your inner ear gives you a position sense when you're on Earth by gravity, and you can tell which way is up, which way is down, left, right. Well, up here we don't have that, and so I can basically, like I did, hang in any direction, and it doesn't bother me at all. I can sleep upside down, I can sleep on any wall, I can basically work in any direction, and it's pretty easy, and my brain doesn't know the difference. So those are some of the biggest things we see. Finally, the last thing I'll probably mention is we do see changes in astronauts' eyes. We've seen some changes in the optic nerve. Sometimes we see swelling of that nerve. We're not quite sure why that occurs, but we get tests done almost monthly to every 2 months up here to keep an eye on our optic nerves and also the changes that are happening in the back of the eye or in the retina. Great question.
Hi, Serena. My name is Martin Silva, and I'm a student in the GW School of Business. And my question is, what has surprised you the most about living in a microgravity environment?
You know, I think the thing that surprised me the most was how quickly I learned how to use my feet to hold on to things. And, you know, on the ground, our feet take us everywhere. We walk, we run, but we don't use it to hold on to things or to stabilize ourselves while working. But up here, if I need to work on a certain wall, I can just hook my feet in and my hands are free. So I use my feet everywhere I go. The first month I was very, not graceful at all. It was pretty ugly and people were laughing at me, but that's okay. And then after a while, I was surprised at how naturally my feet would find that little place to hook into, to stabilize myself, to keep me still while working. And it really didn't take very long. So the human body is absolutely amazing. It adapts to just about any environment you have, and it learns to use what's up here.
Hello, my name is Anari Payton, and I'm from Smothers Elementary School. My question is, what kind of food do you eat in space?
Ooh, I am so glad you asked that because I brought some food to show you today, and this is actually what I'm going to eat tonight. Let me show you. We'll start with, I don't know if you guys like shrimp or not, but this is shrimp cocktail. It's actually little dried up shrimp in here, and we have to insert water through this spout. We have a special water dispenser that gives us clean water. So it looks a little dry and shriveled right now, but once you add water, it's actually really good and spicy. So we like this up here. And then this is teriyaki vegetables. And again, it doesn't look very impressive at first, but once you add water, it's actually quite tasty, and it turns into a little bit more of a vegetable treat. Most of our food up here, a lot of it anyway, we do add water to in order to rehydrate it. We do have food similar to what the military eats, kind of what they call meals ready to eat, or MREs, and those are food in pouches. And then finally, we do have some fresh food, and I think the most popular fresh food we have up here is the tortilla. We have lots of tortillas. They tend to keep really, really well, and you can put just about anything in a tortilla and make it taste good. So that's kind of some of the food that we eat, but I'll be eating this later for dinner. So what I'm going to do right now is push these down to the end of the module. There they go. Hope they don't, Ricky's working down there too.
Hello, my name is Naima Paris. I go to school at Walter Francis Stevens. How do you bathe in space?
That's a good question.
Ooh, I wish we had a shower up here, but we just don't, nor do we have a bathtub. So we have these very special towels that we use, and you can put special soap on the towels, and you inject water into a little packet similar to what I just showed you. And you get that towel all nice and wet, and you just kind of rub your body all down with it, and that's the best we can do as far as a bath or shower. When it comes to washing hair, obviously, I have to work a little bit more than the guys do, but I basically take a drink bag, and I won't wash my hair for you here, but I'll show you the drink bag. So I take this drink bag, and I basically squirt a little bit of water up top. And the water, because of surface tension, just kind of stays right there as a big bubble. It's not going anywhere. And it sticks to your hair the same way. I'm going to drink this right now. It's actually orange juice. But anyway, so when you wash your hair, you end up squirting that same water all around your scalp, and it just sits right there. So then I use a comb to kind of brush the water through, and I do the same thing with the soap, and then use the towel to dry it. Surprisingly, it feels pretty clean when you're done, but it is not as good as a hot shower.
Hi, my name is Zach Beck, and I am from Smothers Elementary School. My question is, how do you go to sleep in space?
Sleeping. Actually, we all find that we sleep pretty well up here. Our crew quarters, which is like our little bedroom, it's about the size of a phone booth, not very big. It's where all our personal belongings are. We also have our own sleeping bag inside of there. And it's a special sleeping bag that we kind of like a mummy bag that you zip up and then your arms stick out to the side just like this. And you kind of sleep like that. And I do hook it into the wall, so I'm not floating completely freely, although you could if you wanted to. It's really your choice. I could sleep anywhere I wanted to on station, but I like my little crew quarters because it's nice and warm and dark. But that being said, because there's no gravity up here, you can sleep on any wall. You can sleep upside down in any direction. And unlike Earth, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you know where you are because you feel the bed pressing against your back and gravity tells you where you are. Up here, we don't have that. So the only sense I have of telling me where my body is my visual cue, or it's where my eyes are telling me where I am. And when you wake up in the dark like that, there have been several times where I wake up and I think I'm turned over upside down completely, and I'm not. But it takes me a few seconds for my eyes to tell me where I am and if I'm upright.
Hello, my name is Carlin Judge, and I am from Whittier Education Campus. My question is, how long does it take before being in space affects your body?
Wow, I'd say it affects you almost immediately. In fact, when we were launching, and remember I told you it took about 8.5 minutes to insert the vehicle into orbit, once that 8.5 minutes was up, the third stage of the rocket cut off. It was a very abrupt cutoff, and immediately you could feel yourself floating. And immediately my brain wasn't quite sure it was happening. I felt like all the panels in the vehicle had tilted a little bit, and several astronauts have described that they feel like they're hanging from the ceiling a little bit, and I think that's because all the fluid actually starts to move towards your head. So your legs kind of become really, really skinny, and your face becomes very puffy, and some people think that we sound very congested, almost like we're sick, but we're not. It's just because in space, all that fluid moves towards your head. And so space begins to affect your body almost immediately upon reaching orbit. And then after a while, you just get used to things, and you don't feel like your head is so stuffy anymore, and you don't feel any difference in your legs or your arms. You almost begin to feel normal, like it's your home.
My name is Allie Eastburn. I'm from the School Without Walls High School, and my question is, what does a regular day on the International Space Station look like?
Wow, I can say no day is the same. Right now, we're getting ready for a bunch of things, so I'll tell you what my day's been like the past couple days. We're getting ready for some spacewalks that'll be coming up hopefully by the end of this month or the next month. So we've been preparing all of our special space suits, or what we call EMUs, to go out of the airlock and do some work on the space station. We've been doing science experiments all day long. I'm actually, right after I finished talking with you guys, in this same module that I'm in actually the Japanese module, the JPM. We have a special thing called the plant habitat, where we're going to be growing some plants here very shortly, and I have to go over and water those plants. So besides that, we are always doing repair or maintenance work on board the space station. You know, space station's not a brand new house. It's getting a little bit older. And so we always do work on it and upkeep to make sure things work as they should. But our day starts about 7:30 in the morning, and we work until 7:30 at night. So it's a pretty long day, but all of us, if you talk with all of us, we all feel like every day goes by really, really fast because we feel so busy all the time. And before we know it, a whole week has gone past. I can't believe that my crew, myself, Alex, and Sergey have already been up here for over 100 days. That absolutely blows my mind because sometimes it feels like we launched just yesterday.
Hi, my name is Indira Moshi, and I'm from School Without Walls at Francis Stevens. My question is, did you always want to be an astronaut?
Well, I think my family is there today, and they're probably nodding yes. And welcome to my family there at GW and all my family listening at home. I think since I was very little, I just wanted to be an astronaut. I remember watching shuttles launch over and over again when I was in elementary school, specifically the 4th and the 5th grade. I just remember being very interested and having my family, my parents, and all my sisters always encourage me. They always thought, if this is what you want to do, this is great. You know, we will encourage you and support you. And they always have. So for me, I always felt like it was a goal that was within reach. And, there are many times where I had folks tell me, well, do you know what the odds are? Just, it's so hard to get in, and 1 out of a million people, and blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to them. Do what you want to do. If you feel like you want to do something and you're passionate about it, make it happen.
My name is William Hernandez. I am from Whittier Education Campus. My question is, did you have to make sacrifices to achieve what you wanted to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a lot of sacrifices you make. I think one of the hardest things about training for a space station mission like this, as fun as the mission is we spend a lot of time away from home and away from family. When we get assigned to a mission, we start training about 2 to 2.5 years prior to that mission, which sounds like a long time, and it is. And we spend easily 50 to 60% of that time in Russia training. That's because we launch on a Russian vehicle, the Soyuz vehicle, and we also train on the Russian part of the International Space Station. We also spend time in Japan and Canada and Europe. So all those international trips sound like fun, and they really are, but you are away from your family, and that's probably one of the toughest parts about training for something like this.
My name is Addison Buffalo, and I'm from the Hanover, Pennsylvania First Lego League. My question is, how does creativity come into play as an astronaut? Are there any artistic activities or experiments you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had lots of astronauts up here in the past do everything from sewing to knitting to watercolor. Music, especially. Music is a big part of our existence up here. We were chatting about it just yesterday at how when you look around a module and you can see to my left and to my right, there's lots of cables and wires and laptops, and it just seems like a very sterile environment, very machine-like, and it is. You hear the hum of machines and fans whirring constantly. But the moment you insert music, and it can be any type of music, it just changes the entire mood. So we have 2 guitars up here on Space Station. We actually have a small keyboard as well. We have a pan flute. We have a recorder. We have musical instruments down in the Russian segment. And just this past Saturday, we were all having fun playing the guitar and playing the recorder and singing songs together, including the Russians. I mean, we are kind of one family up here, and we love getting together on Friday and Saturday evenings and doing that. I think one of the other big things that folks like to do creativity-wise is photography. Obviously, the view we get from up here is unmatched, and especially one of my favorite parts are the aurora, or you might have heard them as the northern lights, and those are those green, really cool lights that seem alive. And so we'll take special time-lapse photography stills and try and put presentations together to try and portray to everyone on Earth how beautiful it is to see these things from up here.
Hi, my name is Kylie Gleason, and I'm a student at GW School of Engineering and Applied Science. And my question is, what's the most rewarding part of your job?
Honestly, it's talking to you guys, and it's all the folks I get to reach out to, not only during the mission, but before the mission. It is so much fun being able to talk with students and explain to them what we do, what happens on the space station, what sort of science is up here, and how you guys can get involved. I think a lot of folks don't understand the science that's going on, and I don't think they could ever be a part of it. But we've got science experiments up here from high school through undergrad and graduate school. And so it's a lot of fun for me to be able to talk about those things. And I think a lot of folks feel like maybe some of the science that we do up here also doesn't impact them on Earth. But for example, we did cancer therapy research up here just a couple months ago, and that's because they feel like in space, some cells in the body grow just like they do in the body, and scientists really can't grow them very well on Earth. But for whatever reason in space, these cells feel like they're at home, and they want to grow and grow and grow. And that allows researchers to test chemotherapy agents on them to see how well that would work. And so being able to do work like that up here really makes it just makes everything more meaningful. We know that it could possibly and hopefully impact folks on Earth. And so but at the same point, it's really fun sharing that with you guys.
Hello, Aunt Serena. This is Aunt Sophia. I've been selected to ask you a question, and my question is, what are 3 things you'll miss from your life on the ISS when you are back home?
Hi, Anna Sophia. It's so good to hear your voice up here. I'm so glad you guys are there today watching. So let me think about this. Number 1, bloating. Number 2, floating. Number 3, and floating. So yeah, honestly, floating is one of the best parts. Flying to and from work, flying everywhere you go. You watch how we become like little graceful airplanes up here after a while. It's just amazing to watch us move and how graceful people get, even me, after 2 or 3 months. Besides that, I will miss the crew. The crew is absolutely fantastic. Both our Russian cosmonauts, Oleg and Sergei, and then my American astronauts up here, Ricky and Drew, and our German astronaut, Alex Gerst. Just a fantastic crew. It's the people that you miss. It's the interactions you have with those people, and really also looking out the window. So when we look out our windows, we obviously have a very different view than what you guys have. It's a much broader view, and it's absolutely beautiful.
I'm afraid we've run out of time for questions with Serena. So let me tell you, Serena, this has been fabulous, wonderful. I'm not quite sure what the right adjective is to describe this, but thank you so much. We have 30 seconds. This has been a lot of fun for all of us, and we're so proud to call you a SEAS alumna. We wish you all the best for the rest of the mission and look forward to seeing you on this campus before too long. Thank you.
Thank you.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Right away? Okay. Wow. What a treat. It's a pretty unusual thing. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I think, for most of us. While we're all taking in what we've just seen and heard, I'm going to invite Dr. Charles Kamada to come up on stage for the second part of our program. And I think as a former NASA astronaut, he'll have some thoughts to share with us of what we've just heard from Serena. Charlie, would you come up on stage, please? He's on his way. We're doing a little ad-libbing on the program today because I know it would be very disappointing for the students who prepared their questions not to have them answered. So before I introduce Dr. Kamada formally, I'm going to have the students come up, the remaining ones, and ask their question. And Dr. Kamada has been an astronaut, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of them. Maybe differently than Serena, but I'm sure he's going to do a really good job. So next question.
Hello, my name is Anna Uyghur, and I am a student at the Elliott School, at GW's Elliott School of International Affairs. SEAS alumnus Dean Coughlin couldn't be here today, so I'm asking his question for him. How has the International Space Station helped prepare astronauts for missions beyond Earth orbit, such as a trip to Mars?
That's an excellent question, and having people like Serena on space station, medical doctors, people doing research in biomechanics and how people react and can evolve and live in space. And she mentioned many of the things that they have to address and many more issues when we go to Mars, for instance, space radiation. She talked about being in the Earth's magnetosphere and not having the effect of galactic radiation as bad. And so studying, we've learned more about the human body, and you just heard her explain a little bit about we're noticing changes in the eyes. Well, we're going to have to understand more about this, and not only physiological health, but also mental health. Those astronauts are going to be in that small environment that can, if you will, traveling for 6 months, going all the way to Mars before they land on Mars. And they have to be healthy because they're going to have to experience the G-forces. So a lot of the research we're doing is basic fundamental science. A lot of it is life science for how we could survive in space.
Thank you.
My name is Chelsea St. Anjme, and I'm an alumna from GW's Clemene College of Arts and Sciences. My question is, what is the most psychologically challenging aspect of being in space?
You know, it's a very extreme environment. You're isolated. As a matter of fact, I'm teaching a course on that right now at NYU. And so how we behave in space, how we select crews to survive healthy in that environment for long periods of time, how do we train those crews so that they're as best prepared as they could possibly be, so that when they're up there, they stay healthy, they look out for one another, they have each other's back, and they get along. It's a very good question. It's a very important question, especially when we go to Mars. You'll be spending over a year on the surface of Mars or more, and so that's a big part of it.
My name is Ian Pinsker-Lindsay from SWWFS. My question is, when you're done with your training, what does it feel like when you stare at the Earth through your own eyes?
Yeah, that's a very big part of it. It's a salutogenic effect. It revives you, it vitalizes you for you to be able to see Earth and look down there. You heard astronaut Serena talking about her experiences looking at the northern lights, the southern lights, and you're relatively close to Earth. You know, you're only 200 miles up in space, so you could see Earth. When we go to Mars, the Earth is just going to be a little dot out there, just like a star. And so what is that going to have? What kind of effect is that going to have when you're that far away from Earth? It's something that we have to find out.
Thank you.
My name is Lauren Bradley, and I'm a student in GW School of Engineering and Applied Science. My question is, what's the most awe-inspiring thing you have seen while in space?
I would, you know, I was only up there a short time. I was only up there for 14 days on a space shuttle mission. But one of the things that we did get to see was a dust storm over the Arabian Peninsula. And it was just massive brown cloud, and it was just something we didn't expect to see. I'm sure Serena didn't talk about it, but you get to see hurricanes and natural events like that on Earth that are just awesome. She talked about the northern lights. When we happened to fly, there was a lot of solar activity, and the southern lights were really prominent, and it's almost like you're flying right through them.
My name is Dr. Jason Czar. I'm a member of the faculty of GW's Department of Biomedical Engineering. And my question is, what are the biggest differences in maintaining health in space versus on Earth? And are there any differences in responding to potential health events in space as opposed to on Earth?
Well, that's a very good question. And, you know, we train people as EMTs, the best we could do to take care of health issues and serious health issues in space. It would be great to have a doctor in space with you like Serena. We had several doctors in my class. Dr. Lee Morin was one, and that's something we really have to think about. Things like a kidney stone, minor things that we think about like toothaches and things like that could become very serious. And so being able to deal with that on space station, we have stuff, we have equipment to monitor the health of us when we're in space, and we have things for if people go into cardiac arrest. We have AEDs up there and things like that, but you're never really sure what you're going to run into when you're up there. We try to select crew so that won't happen in 6 months to a year when you're up in space. But you really have to think about that when you're on the surface of Mars and you're out there over 2 years in space.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Camarda. My name is Lujaina Al-Khawi, and I'm a student in GW's Department of Biomedical Engineering. My question is, what sort of biotech experiments are being conducted aboard the ISS or any other mission that you know of?
You know, I do not know what they're doing up there right now. That would have been a great question for Serena. That would have been a great question for Serena. I'm sorry.
It's okay, thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to ask Serena all the questions. I get to ask a final question, Charlie. It's from a C student, Anna E. Juarez, who's not able to be here today. Anna E. writes, "My dream is to become an astronaut. What advice do you have for an aspiring astronaut?"
I think Serena kind of mentioned it. I think I tell students to follow your passion. You know, we talk about being good in math, science, technology, engineering, medicine. We're going to need astronauts from all different disciplines. And more importantly, we're going to need astronauts that are good in many different fields. When we look at these astronauts like Serena, she's a medical doctor and an engineer. I mean, that's what it's going to take. I mean, how many of you have seen the movie The Martian? Right? It's going to take a botanist. It's going to take a medical doctor. It's going to take an engineer. It's going to take a scientist. And we have to be cross-trained. It would be great to have people like Serena, my good friend Lee Morin, who are medical doctors, surgeons, and unbelievable engineers. And they could fix almost anything. So I think follow your passion. And like Serena said, it's difficult to be selected to be an astronaut. I don't know what the odds are. They're pretty high, but I wouldn't give up. As long as you're following and learning, because we learn, even old people like me keep learning, and we're working at something that we know we love, we're going to be happy. And maybe if we're really lucky, we get to fly in space, and that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Well, thanks to all our questioners today. We'll move on to the next session right now. If you'd like to take a seat, Charlie, I'll join you in just a moment. So we're doing things slightly A to M, back to J, and so on and so on. But I'm going to offer a few words about Dr. Kamada. There is information, a biography, in the printed program that you have, so I'm just going to touch on a few highlights here. Dr. Kamada flew as Mission Specialist 5 on the return to flight mission STS-114 Discovery, and he logged more than 333 hours in space. For those of you who are less familiar with the nation's space program, STS-114 Discovery was part of NASA's Space Shuttle program, and it launched in July 2005. About 2.5 years after the loss of the Columbia orbiter in 2003. Astronauts on board space shuttle missions do a variety of things. They launch satellites, interplanetary probes, the Hubble Space Telescope was launched, science experiments are conducted, and they participate in constructing and servicing the ISS, which Serena was talking to us from. Following his Discovery flight, he became the Director of Engineering at NASA Johnson Space Center, and he currently serves as Senior Advisor for Innovation to the Office of the Chief Engineer at NASA headquarters, and he's also the founder and Chief Executive Officer of the EPIC Educational Foundation. And by the way, if you're joining us this afternoon at 4 for the open forum, he'll tell us a lot more about the foundation. So Charlie, I really appreciate you being here today. So let's get started with our conversation.
Thank you, Dean.
Well, you and I are going to talk primarily about deep space exploration. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you what thoughts were running through your head as you listened to Serena just now. It must have rekindled some memories of time and space and the launch and the re-entry. So what do you recollect as your fondest or perhaps your most challenging moments as an astronaut?
You know, listening to Serena, I could relate to almost everything that she talked about. It was really exciting. She's a phenomenal person. You got a really good glimpse of her personality. What a cool woman. I think, and she talked about what she loves about being in space. I think, you know, flying on Space Shuttle was a much shorter mission. We flew right after the Columbia accident. And so we had specific tests that we had to do, and it was a very tight schedule. and we had to do them right, and we didn't have a whole lot of free time. But when people ask me, what do I love most, what do I miss most about it, I think it's that feeling of working with that elite team. Not only the crew that you fly with and train with for years, but your trainers, the people on the ground, your doctors, your medical doctors, your family support people. It takes thousands of people on the ground, very capable engineers, researchers, scientists, psychologists, behavioral scientists, in order to support us up in space. And it's just a great feeling when you're out there and things are happening and they don't always go exactly right, that you're able to bring this team together and come up with innovative solutions to problems. That's what I loved.
I kept my introduction of you purposefully brief, so I want to ask you whether there's anything you'd like to tell the audience about your work at NASA on what in the old days was called the National Aerospace Program. I worked on that a little bit, or the high-speed research or reusable launch vehicles that sort of triggered your excitement about becoming an astronaut.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, why I became an astronaut, why I started working for NASA was because I had an internship in between my junior and senior year. And I spent 2 months at NASA Langley Research Center and was able to work with some of the most amazing researchers in the world that were doing cutting-edge research in structural mechanics. And that's, you know, that's when I was almost a senior. I'd taken a lot of courses, really didn't know what I wanted to do, but that's when I realized doing research was something that was really interesting to me and I would really love to do. And so I got to work. I was very lucky, got to work at NASA, surprisingly, and got to work at NASA Langley. And some of those programs that you mentioned, David, like the National Aerospace Plane and the Single Stage to Orbit program, the X-33 program, they were more difficult to solve than even us going to the moon and probably even going back to Mars. Going to Mars and bringing humans to Mars. And the reason is we don't have the technology yet. We can get to Mars, we can put robots on Mars, but the aerospace plane, as you well know, taking off like an airplane and flying straight into the upper atmosphere and into space, and then coming back and landing like an airplane and doing it over and over again. Still a dream, and we're still working on it. And like so many other really great, challenging projects. That's why I started the Epic Challenge program. They haven't been done before. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting. And so that's why I tell students, you know, if you don't become an astronaut, I was really lucky to be a researcher. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to do now, too. But it's more difficult.
Well, moving on, from the discussion we had with Serena and some of your remarks, it's clear that getting into low Earth orbit, which of course is where the space shuttle was and where the International Space Station is in itself already very, very challenging. As we think ahead, moving further and further and further away from Earth, a trip to Mars perhaps, and then ultimately extending a presence on Mars, the challenges, it's pretty obvious, I think, to all of us, just grow and grow in scope and complexity. So what do you think are some of the most challenging technical issues from hardware point of view, software point of view, with respect to vehicle configuration, propulsion, system controls, maintaining communications with Earth for a mission to somewhere even as far away or as close as Mars?
From a hardware software standpoint, I think getting there quicker. Chemical propulsion, it takes us 6 months to get there. If we're looking at plasmas and other types of systems, it might cut that in half. Nuclear systems, even more. And so we're constantly going to be working on those far-out propulsion technologies. Some of the biggest challenges, we mentioned them a little bit, space radiation and protecting humans. when we go outside the magnetosphere, and we're in transit. Just getting there is when we're going to be bombarded with cosmic radiation, maybe some solar power events, which we have to shelter down to protect ourselves. And so how do we survive that? How does it affect the body? The other, from a mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering point of view, is how do we land that tonnage going through the atmosphere of Mars? We do these larger and larger spacecrafts that we land robotically, but to get the amount of equipment and supplies on the surface of Mars, have to go through that atmosphere. And how do we do that safely and land? And then how do we keep that machinery up and running? And so these are some issues that we have to struggle with and think about right now. How do you sustain human beings for that length of time on the surface of another planet? Takes tonnage to get into space. It's a logistics a nightmare. And so a lot of us are looking at what they call in situ resource utilization. How do we live off the land? How do we send robots ahead of the humans before we go to Mars so that they could look at using the atmosphere on Mars to make methane, to make hydrogen, oxygen? We absolutely have to find water there. And how do we build habitats and structures in situ? And we're actually working on that right now. And NASA has challenges with students around the country, around the world. We have a NASA robotic mining competition. We have a 3D printed structures competition where students are looking at building habitats on the surface of Mars using elements derived from the planet.
Well, you partially answered my third question, which I'm just about to elaborate on. But how do you feel, what do you think are the challenging issues with respect, for example, people having to work with robots? Because we haven't really done this yet.
Right, but we are doing it. Mm-hmm. We are doing it, and we are learning. And these are the new skills. You know, David, when we went to school, we were in departments, aerospace engineering, we learned fluid mechanics, we learned structural mechanics, material science, controls, and these were specific disciplines. And what we're learning now is that we have new skills that we have to learn. And these new skills, Harvard Business Review, I was reading an article in the last issue about working with robots. And these are fusion skills. How do we learn to work with robots and to train robots so that they learn from us side by side? And how do we use this technology most effectively? And so these are skills that we're learning that we need right now on Earth. We're definitely going to need those skills when we're working in space and when we go back to Mars, because it's definitely going to be man and machine. That's the only way we're going to be able to make this sustainable.
Mm-hmm. One of the students earlier in the questioning period brought up the question about what is the sort of most psychologically challenging issue about being an astronaut. But as we move, I think you mentioned it also, as we move further and further away from Earth, and Earth doesn't become these beautiful pictures that we see, but just another white dot sparkling a little bit sparkly in the sky. Do you think there are any special issues that are going to come up, and what sorts of people do we need to select for these missions, and what kind of training do they need to go through? Because it is extreme isolation, isn't it?
It is, and some of the differences, for instance, you know, we could see Serena on the screen and there's a 3-second delay. When we go to Mars, it's a 20 to 40 minute communication delay. So if you saw the movie The Martian, these astronauts that we select, these special people that we select, have to be able to work almost autonomously, semi-autonomously, limited communication. We're going to have to find new ways to communicate with our family, to keep that connection with our family on space station. We could Skype with our family if we wanted every night. We could have these passes where we could call you up using the computer software-activated phone on space station, and you would be able to answer on your cell phone, for instance. We won't be able to do that when we go back to Mars. And so we're going to have to, so what do we do? How do we select these astronauts? And we're teaching this course, and right now we're looking at these analog environments, these short periods where we put these astronauts as teams in these very extreme environments, and we watch their behavior, almost like lab animals, right? And we watch how we behave. We look at combining crews and how we make up the crew and how we select the crew to make sure that they support each other in a way that will be healthy when they're in space. And then we throw problems at them and we see how they respond. And so we do the best that we can to train and select the crew, select in those qualities, those attributes that we hope are going to sustain them for these long missions.
Mm-hmm. So with respect to these long missions, I've asked you quite a few questions on this, but what have I missed? What should I have asked you about deep space exploration?
Well, I think, when we talked about this a little bit when you asked me to come here, we talked about learning and the technology that we're using to learn and the different ways that we learn. Well, these astronauts, they're going to be in space a long time. They have to maintain their skills. And so how do we do that? What simulations do we do that we have that they could train and maintain the skills that they've acquired to maintain them in space, but they will also have to learn new skills. We can't pick crews that have all the skills that they're going to need. We don't have a crew and a team on the ground that if they're in an emergency situation or they have to respond very rapidly to diagnose a problem, may take weeks, may take months, they may have to learn new skills on the fly as they're there. And so we should be able to send everything up there that we could possibly think of to not only entertain these astronauts and to keep them cognitively motivated, but that is there for them in case they have to learn new skills. Mm-hmm. And so maybe the qualities we look for on these teams are people that are able to pick up new skills easily and help each other learn.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to open up to questions from the audience. So there is a mic in the middle corridor here. So if you'd like to step up to that to ask your question. You can ask questions about the topics we've been talking about, or Charlie's experience as an astronaut, or whatever intrigues you about space travel. So please step forward. And if you'll just say who you are and where you're from, that would be helpful. Don't be shy.
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm a student in the GW School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And my question is, do you think that Mars realistically is the next step? Or should we try to set up like a permanent base on the moon first? So what do you think is like the next thing that NASA should be doing?
Well, the next thing they say NASA should be doing is going back to the moon. And a lot of people are making a case for us to go back to the moon first. I personally am kind of enamored with going to Mars. I like to do things in a big way. I think, and you tell me, what do you think excites the public? We've been to the moon. There's a lot more we could learn from going to the moon. But to me, I'd like to do that next great thing, and I think we're ready for it. And I think there's more there, possibly on the surface of Mars, more challenges, more resources for us to potentially sustain a habitat. But NASA likes to take a very conservative, stepping stone kind of approach. My worry in going to the moon first is that it isn't easy to do. NASA isn't the same NASA it was in the 1960s. And we're finding it harder to do these very innovative things. And we may be spending way too much money going to the moon and people might lose interest in exploring deep space. And I think putting humans deeper in space, and going to the moon is going deeper in space, by the way, since we've been locked into 200 miles around the surface of the Earth. But I'd like to see us really pick what I call an epic challenge. Let's do it, just like we did in the 60s. Let's go and say we're going to put humans on the moon, on Mars.
Next question.
How's it going? I'm James. I'm a sophomore mechanical engineer here at George Washington. So the first time we went to the moon, it was kind of a race to space and which country could achieve it the fastest. What do you think the role of international collaboration is in the journey to Mars?
That's a very good question. And I think that's one of the greatest assets we have with the space program. It took over 15 countries to build the space station. It's the hugest engineering achievement that we have to date, and it took 15 different countries. When we go to Mars, it's going to take the entire planet, and it brings us closer together. You know, I'm old enough to remember the Cold War, David, and the Mercury 7 astronauts, and it was a race. We were doing nuclear drills in my elementary school in case we went to war with the Russians. And now we're working side by side with the Russians on the International Space Station. We're training in Russia. We're learning Russian. We're launching from Russia. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's going to take diversity of people, diversity of thought. It's going to take that for us to come up with ingenious ways, innovative ways to solve these really challenging problems. And I think that's going to bring us closer together, and that's a good thing.
I'm William from the first robotic Lego Club from Hanover, and I'm wondering if you can have like another way to generate electricity other than like sun. Like in Mars, you could probably use wind because of the dust storms.
You're looking at lots of different ways. Potentially, you could be using oxygen and you could be using oxygen and hydrogen, right? You could be creating fuel cells. We're looking at nuclear. We're looking at just changes in temperature changes, driving thermionic conversion to create electricity. They do have dust storms, but the wind, it's like 1/100th the atmosphere on the surface of Earth, so it's not as powerful. And so there are lots of other ways that we have to think about, but to get the high density that we need to run some of the machines, we may really need to start thinking about nuclear fuel.
To lower the mic.
Hi, my name is Alex. My question is, where does pooping pee go in space, and won't it smell and stink and stuff?
I think I caught part of that, and yes, it does smell, but you know what? We don't notice it. We don't notice it because we're all in that container together. And but one of the things we notice when they do open up that door of shuttle, because shuttle does come back, is that it really does smell in space. But we do try, and hygiene is very important. And as Serena mentioned, we have our daily chores. We have to clean that space station just like we clean our homes here on Earth.
Hello, I'm Tommy Gray, astrophysics major here at GW. Dr. Camarda, you mentioned recently about how going to Mars and these will sort of bind the Earth together, sort of in some ways, because we have to work together to achieve a goal that large. when it gets past just getting to Mars, when it comes to eventually colonizing it, if that's a potential option, how will bringing people from Earth who are not necessarily scientists, how do you think that will affect like the culture of Earth as a whole? Do you think it'll be a positive effect for it?
Whew, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. It's almost like you see play out in some of these science fiction movies, right? About wanting to totally live your life on another planet, and the possibility of doing that. And I'm thinking that's pretty far in the future, but I think it's maybe not too far in the future that we should be thinking about that. And what sort of a life and what sort of a community do we want to have on that other planet in forms of governance and government, and what ideology is it going to be, and what rules are we going to have? And maybe when we think about that, we could start thinking about that could positively change how we think about our cultures here on Earth in a good way, as we're thinking about creating these communities that are going to be very diverse, people from all parts of the Earth to be part of it. It'll be like an interglobal kind of community and culture that we would have to start, I guess, experimenting with before we sent people up to actually colonize. That's a great question for sociologists to be thinking about, and behavioral scientists.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Camarda. My name is Stephen Brunetto. I'm a mechanical engineering student here. And my question was, you were on the return to flight missions. Can you describe what that experience was like following the Columbia disaster?
Yeah, the Columbia disaster was terrible, right? I mean, we made terrible decisions as engineers. We made terrible decisions as program managers. It should never have happened, okay? Everyone looks at the technical problem that caused the accident, the piece of foam that came off and hit the wing leading edge, but it's much, much more than that. And this is typically what NASA doesn't get, what engineers don't get, because we live on the left side of our brain. We don't think a lot with the right side of our brain, and realize that sociology, psychology, behavior, and the environments that we create for people to discuss openly problems and not be afraid, to be psychologically safe. We don't recognize when we're not attentive, when other people are trying to raise an issue to us. That's very, very serious and a very big problem. And I will tell you, it was a problem when I flew in space. When our team was in space, the trust was not there with the ground, okay? We knew that we could talk to our team, our head of the astronaut office, and we can connect with people around the world if we needed to, and not go through mission control to understand if we had a critical problem. What we did do on our flight, and the purpose of our flight, was really to test a lot of the new technology that we had developed to make sure that we were safe, our vehicle was healthy in space. So a lot of the equipment that we took up, that we experimented with, were things to inspect the vehicle, that every shuttle flight after we flew, used those procedures, used those equipments, used those processes in order to make sure that their vehicle was safe to return back. We also developed, worked with teams of people around the country to develop repair kits. If our vehicle got hit with a piece of foam, if we had damage, we could send astronauts out there in a spacewalk and repair the vehicle. So from an engineer standpoint, it was great to be on that flight. I felt totally safe. I felt like it would be one of the safest flights ever, and we had a very good strategy to protect us. What we don't have is a good strategy to basically solve NASA's bigger problem, which is the culture.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Travis. I go to school without walls at Francis Stephen. And my question is, with global warming, what can we possibly do to make sure that we're okay, kind of?
It's a very, very good question. A very good question, and we hear a lot about it, right? And we're trying to understand more and more about our fragile oasis, our little blue marble that we live on called Earth. And a lot of this whole emphasis on climate change and the climate and the environment on Earth really came about after the Apollo program, when you think about it, when the astronauts could actually were on the moon, circling the moon, looking back at that planet, you know, and it was like one big blue marble, and we said, wow, it's small, right? And we only have but limited resources. How do we ensure that we're going to conserve and protect that planet? And so a lot of the research we do in space is to understand our environment here on Earth, a lot of our satellites, a lot of what we're doing on space stations, is to understand so that we can predict as accurately as possible what's going to happen. Okay, the other thing that we're doing is also learning how to conserve and live very successfully with our environment. When you think about it, we have to conserve oxygen. We have to scrub the atmosphere on the space station to get the carbon dioxide out. How do we recirculate all of that? How do we regenerate all that? How do we do that and live almost in a closed loop so it's almost 100% efficient? Right now, you know, we can get close to maybe 90 or so percent, but learning how to create those machines to do that will help us create more sustainable cities here on Earth. Learning how to sustain humans on space station, where oxygen is very precious, water is very precious. Serena didn't go into it, but yes, the astronauts on space station do drink urine, do drink their own urine. It gets recycled. And so we conserve as much as we possibly can. And so by doing that, by going into space, it will help us build better cities here on Earth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Lenny, and I'm in 7th grade at the Langley School. My question is, how does seeing Earth from a different perspective when you're in space, how does it change the way you view life, and how does it change your perspective of life?
Yeah, that's another very good question. I kind of answered it in different ways, and so did Serena. You know, you get the sense that we're all here on one small planet, and we have to make the best use of it as we possibly can. And why are we fighting amongst ourselves, right? We should be helping each other out, because, you know, it is pretty small in this vast universe, and that changes you. It changes your perspective on how you view your place on this planet. You're connected with everyone around the globe, okay? You especially. I mean, you probably have friends all around the world right now. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Michaela, and I'm also in 7th grade at the Langley School. My question is, so for those 14 days that you were in space, did you ever get used to the change? Like Serena said, that you felt like you were congested.
Oh yeah. You get over that in about 2 or 3 days. Okay, and believe me, you're having so much fun in space, you don't even notice if you're congested. You could be really sick, and you probably wouldn't even notice it, because when you first get up there, you're really excited.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one last question. I'm sorry to you guys behind. If you have time this afternoon and want to come to the Science and Engineering Hall, the Lehman Auditorium, we have an open forum, and you might have an opportunity to ask your question then, but we're going to have to wrap up here now, so please, one last question.
Hi, I'm Josiah Brower from the First LEGO League program in Hanover, and I was wondering, like, how long it took after you got back to Earth, like, to get back to, like, the normal things. Like, I know in space, like, the zero gravity, it's really fun and stuff, and, like, when you get back, you're kind of like planted to the ground. How long did it take to get used to it?
Yeah, It varies. You know, I was only up there 14 days. It's going to take Serena a little bit longer because they have to go through some more conditioning, even though they stay as healthy as they possibly can by working out 2-3 hours, like you heard her say. You still have to be pretty careful, and it might take you a little bit of time. For us, being up there only 14 days, you know, they don't want you driving a car. Your equilibrium is a little off for those first couple of days. If you turn your head and you're looking up, you might fall over. You might get a little disoriented. I had maybe one zero-G moment when I came back from space. You know, as Serena said, you get used to floating in space. And I was in my home, and my daughter came home late, and the alarm went off in the house. And I had to rush to see who was coming in the house, and I tried going like that. I luckily caught myself before I hit the floor, but I was thinking I was flying out of my little sleeping bag in space. But you get used to it pretty quick.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up right now. So, Charlie, thank you for a very thoughtful and certainly thought-provoking conversation. For all of us here who've had the privilege of listening to the two astronauts today, I think it's fair to say that events like this can have a lasting impact, whether they simply plant a seed in your mind about a career as an astronaut or an engineer, or one of the many other professions that support the space program, and they are truly numerous, or whether they just simply, today you've gained a little bit more insight into aeronautics and astronautics, and understand a little better the complexity of trying to move into space and live in space. I hope that one or more of the challenges that our two astronauts talked about today have piqued your curiosity enough for you to look into them and think about how you might be able to contribute some insights or some solutions to them. I encourage you, I think as our two astronauts have done today, to follow your curiosity about something you've learned today. Don't be deterred. Follow up, persist. To all of you then who've joined us both remotely today or via our live stream, and those of you here in the auditorium, thank you for attending this educational downlink. And again, a big thank you to NASA for giving us this opportunity, and once again to Dr. Serena Auñón-Chancellor and Charles Kamada for sharing their knowledge, their experience, and their thoughts with us. So I'm going to close the event now and invite you to join us upstairs on the second floor of the building for a light reception. So I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you so much.